calling in once or twice a month, isn't it? And that's about it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I did actually say from the start that obviously we're not the decision makers here, but the point of view, there was no point in starting to try and do this if the local residents had a genuine concern or objection to what we do at the stadium. But in fairness to them, I've been talking openly and sensibly with them, and yes, it does make the exhaust fumes. Yes, there is some noise, but actually they're quite supportive of what we do, so I can't thank them enough for that.
What would you rather have? Noise once a month? What would you rather have? Beard up football fans, or just the occasional bits of fumes and the occasional little bit of noise every now and again? Which in the greater scheme of things, it's not too bad, is it?
Yeah, that's exactly what one of the local residents said to me, and said, given the two, we actually don't mind it. So the next thing to do from that point was to actually ask them whether they'd like to know more about what we actually do. And that's where we run up the further bit of campaign work with regards to spreading it out to the wider local public area within the London community. So try and get it to as many outlets as what we could within the area.
Now, it's an important year in London this year, as it's an election year for the new mayor. Obviously, Boris now is back being an MP, and he will be standing down. And there are several candidates for the role of mayor. Have you approached any of those campaigns?
We've actually been asking and in discussions with pretty much anyone that you can think of. Certainly, Sadiq Khan raised an objection at the Merton planning level. We have been trying to contact them. We've also been contacting Zach Goldsmith over it, and certainly, obviously, Boris is the key one. But actually, what we have been trying to do is any political avenues we can explore, and in effort to get pressure on this, we have been looking at and working on, and that goes for the national media as well. I mean, we haven't stopped working from the point of view of trying to gain pressure on the local media and also the national media. Local media has been quite supportive, in fairness. The national media we've been discussing with.
So, I mean, I know for a fact that Boris does a talk show on LBC, which is the local talk radio station, which is now available on a national platform on the usual Freeview and DAB things. Have you tried thinking about going on talking and kind of ambushing him on his Call Boris programme?
Yeah, I know me and you actually mentioned that in the comments on the main Save Wimbledon page the other day. Their next calling show is actually scheduled for the 6th of February. Now, we know the petition submission date is next week. So why they moved the actual interview, I don't actually know that. But they have moved it to the 6th of February, and you do have to write in and request your questions. So it's not quite as live as what you might initially be led to believe. But I actually looked on the website the other day in view of seeing whether we could look into doing something where a number of us actually ring up about it.
That's, a politician asking for questions beforehand. That's not. It's not really interaction, is it? Really, it's not question time.
I did look at it and think to myself like that. I was hoping for a little bit more than that, if I was honest with you.
Is there any discussions of trying to find a replacement venue? I know in London, a little square plot of land like that would cost you vast amounts. But have you thought about what happens should the worst happen and Wimbledon close? What happens next? Do you look towards perhaps Arena Essex? Or do you think, right, okay, that's London gone, we'll just have to put up with Aldershot, Eastbourne and Ipswich?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually something that was said to me the other day regarding the tracks in the area and what you look at, and that was actually from a driver. I'm not involved in the running of the sport as such. What I am is a driver and a London fan, if you like, that's trying to put pressure on for the last London venue. And what I mean by that is we need to say we want to save racing in London. We want to save Wimbledon Stadium. We want to get the doors and avenues opened in order to try and look at the situation of losing the London venue. If we can make that happen, then obviously then there is a lot more work to do over what can be done, what can't be done, what can be looked at, etc. So to be honest with you, I don't know the answer exactly to that question yet, because obviously I'm not from a decision-making point of view. I'm purely just a fan-base point of view that's trying to raise awareness of the stadium going, if that makes sense.
So who's to blame for the situation that we're in at the moment?
Oh, do you know what? I think there is probably a multiple reasons why this situation has occurred now. In no big part, I have got to say that probably Risk Capital Partners buying the GRA, when was they really interested in greyhound racing? I'm not so sure of that. That definitely plays a big part. Also, the publicity machine we need to absolutely be critical of and say, you know, we need to get as much publicity out there for the motorsport in, you know, overall motorsport in general. Also, some of the other things is the LEZ did play a part, but bear in mind that's now 7 years in. There's 140 bangers booked in for the BWS. There are ways to work round the BWS, to the LEZ in terms of newer vans and things like that. I mean, I actually live in the middle of London. I have to deal with the LEZ every day, so I know how hard it is. Issues.
That's the local emission zones for our non-Londoner listeners.
Yeah, sorry, I do apologise. I jumped into London mode there saying LEZ. I do apologise. Yeah, no, it's actually a low emissions and control zone within the London area that restricts certain HGV vehicles and certain vans over a certain weight limit into London.
Which obviously with bagger drivers and the likes using high abs and with most of our guys using horse boxes now as forms of transportation, it's probably not advisable, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. But, you know, saying that, the actual rules relating to that are now 7 years old, so it's not insurmountable. I mean, me and my brother, in terms of race transporters, there is a number of London drivers within the catchment area. We're able to get round it, and whilst it is expensive outlay, which we're all aware of, it does mean that you can get round it, and so there are ways to work it. In terms of the other reasons for blame, there is probably a cultural issue to do with the population movement within London as well. You know, you have to continually bang the publicity drum in London. I know myself, I work for a local authority on the refuse department, and we have to renew our recycling campaign every 6 months because of how transient the population is. So there's probably elements of that as well.
Well, it's not just that, it's government policy now. Is if you have a brownfield site, it has preference over greenfield if you're building houses. And that's what the current situation is with housing. I mean, it's a very similar situation with Coventry. Coventry, there is an old girl. She is due for demolition. But like I said, the fat lady hasn't quite sung there yet. But it's looking like it could well be. But again, to untrained eyes, and there are many of those. Sporting stadiums like Coventry and Wimbledon, and to a lesser extent, the other stock car stadiums that we have, are prime sites to build on. How many sites have we lost to supermarkets and DIY stores and housing developments over the years? I mean, I could rattle them off like that. I mean, we've got Newton Grange, housing estate, Boston's a B&Q, where else we've got Wisbeach, Tesco's now. There's all these kind of tracks that happen, and the rest of it. There's, even though it is going to be a sporting stadium still, it's just a shame that there's no room at the inn for stock car. When you consider, Cowden Beef has a very similar level of football, perhaps I'd say a little similar level, probably a step down, but they do have a stock car track around the outside of it.
They do, and there are all sorts of options. And I was discussing with someone the other day. Actually, that example is a good way of looking at giving a presentation case. Lokelly is an excellent presentation case of, given the right level of investment in the venue, what can be achieved. Cowden beef is another example. You know, to be honest with you, I actually think that probably Coventry isn't quite unrecoverable. And one of the reasons for this is to actually try and bring awareness to the whole situation. Now, we do need to concentrate on Wimbledon, obviously, from this particular point of view. But at the same time, we can look at the situation and say, listen, we're going to lose probably two of our biggest, most famous stadium-type venues in the country within 6 or 7 months, unless we can put pressure on to try and do something about it. What happens from that in the long term, obviously I can't answer. All I want to do is bang the drum as hard as I can to say we're losing too many here and we need to try and see if we can put pressure on to say we want to keep our stadiums.
Do you think we're in bed with the wrong kind of dying other sports that we're with? I mean, Speedway, they say, is a busted flush in this country, even though we have, the Speedway World Champion. We have Greyhound racing, which, again, unfortunately, has long since lost its popularity since its heyday in the 60s and 70s. Is it a case that now time has moved on and perhaps stock car racing is perhaps the next busted flush?
Well, I don't think so in terms of stock car racing, and I think actually recently, particularly over, say, the last 2 years, there's been massive inroads into the publicity drive. That's my personal opinion. If you think about the positive steps, now, obviously, I do come from a speedway background, but if you think about the Thunder 500 in June at Ipswich, the British touring car drivers, we've actually made big inroads from that side into making relationships with circuits. So I think that we've got growth potential within oval racing. I don't think we've sort of like losing out by a long way. There probably needs to be a point of view of what you do in terms of the stadium complexes and what you use them for. But actually, there is no better reason for London than this particular case to say multi-use stadiums, because of the land value being so high, they have to be the way ahead in one way, shape or form. Because, if you take the likes of big football stadiums and they can self-finance, you're talking about a lot of financing, particularly with somewhere like London. You need to look at multi-use stadiums of whatever description that can work together to complement each existing user.
Okay, finally, Peter, give us your best memory of Wimbledon.
Oh, do you know what? I said this the other day. I'm probably going to say it again. One of Speedworth's legendary starters, because this is probably my best memory. My dad and my granddad used to race in the 60s and 70s. When I was about 5, I stood at the pit gate underneath the tunnel, and my dad introduced me to Ted Weaver, who was the legendary start marshal at Speedworth. And at that time, 5 years old, he signed my autograph, and that was the biggest hero moment. And I think that is my biggest moment at Wimbledon at 5 years old, was getting that autograph signed by the start marshal. Because if you think about young kids, they're going, the starter, he's just like on top of the podium. It's just amazing. And the whole atmosphere of the venue is just incredible. It just epitomises it all for me, that memory.
God, you don't know who you've just... we have... Sammy Brenton, who is the starter at St Day here, and she's just gone, yes, yes, yes.
No, I'm just glad you kind of said that, because I had the same thing as a child. I was exactly the same as a child watching racing. My dad gave up late 80s, but he did veteran races, and he still took me to watch, and that was me. I was the one that was still on the side. I wasn't bothered in the racing. I was watching the starter. And that's what I did.
World champion.
I'm just so glad you said that. It actually makes what I do a little bit more worthwhile.
But I think it's true. I mean, from a entertainment side and spectacle, when you think about the presentation points and that the starter up on that rostrum is a very big focal point of the whole atmosphere of the stadium and the racing. Not just for Wimbledon, I'm talking about oval racing in general. It's a key point. If you have good starters, then people focus on what's happening, because it makes it easier to follow the race. They become, I'm going to say, heroes at 5 years old, because they are like heroes.
You just negotiated a pay rise there for Crispin Rosebery. There you go. If Crispin, if you do listen to this podcast, yeah, Sammie has asked for better terms for next year. She wants
I'm all good.
a nice padded box. And, well, yeah, she's probably got one of those already. But the main thing is,